Dr. Bennet Omalu, and American Football, the ethics of a collision sport. Imagine dedicating your life to something you love, only to discover that it is silently destroying you. Picture a young athlete, cheered on by thousands, unaware that with every impact, every collision, he is inching closer to an invisible war within his own mind. What happens when the pursuit of greatness comes at the cost of one's very identity? How much risk is too much in the name of entertainment? And when the truth threatens an empire, will those in power protect lives or profits? This is the story of Dr. Bennet Omalu. Born in Nigeria in 1968, he immigrated to the United States with the quiet hope of practicing forensic pathology. A brilliant and curious mind, he believed in the power of science to uncover truth. But fate had other plans. In 2002, he performed an autopsy on Mike Webster, a former Pittsburgh Steelers player. Webster, once an icon of strength, had died a broken man, homeless, confused, suffering from severe mental decline. His decline was not an isolated case. It mirrored the struggles of many retired football players. Omalu examined Webster's brain and discovered something shocking: chronic traumatic encephalopathy, or CTE, a degenerative brain disease linked to repeated head trauma. His discovery, rather than being welcomed as a breakthrough, was met with resistance, an overwhelming, aggressive pushback from the National Football League, NFL, and its supporters. Omalu believed he had done what any scientist would: uncover the truth and share it. But he underestimated the power of the institution he was up against. When Omalu published his findings in 2005 in the journal Neurosurgery, he expected that the medical community, and by extension the NFL, would take the issue seriously. Instead, he was ridiculed. League-affiliated doctors dismissed his work, calling it flawed, speculative, even fallacious. Some went as far as to suggest that CTE did not exist. Omalu was a foreigner, an outsider in the American sports system, and the NFL used that against him, implying that he didn't understand the game or its culture. He was pressured to retract his findings, but he refused. Instead, he continued his research, studying more former players and finding similar results. For Omalu, science was not about opinion, it was about facts. Yet his facts were inconvenient for one of the most powerful sports organizations in the world. The NFL had everything to lose. If CTE was real, then football was not just dangerous, it was potentially lethal in the long run. Acknowledging the disease meant lawsuits, financial losses, and most importantly, a fundamental change in how the game was played. The league could not afford that. Behind the scenes, the NFL used its influence to suppress Omalu's research. He received warnings that he was going up against a corporation that owns a day of the week, a reference to the NFL's dominance over Sundays in America. He was excluded from important discussions on player safety, and attempts were made to discredit his work. At one point, Omalu and his family faced intimidation. He later admitted that he feared for his safety, feeling as though he had become an enemy of a billion-dollar empire. In his own words, he was not just fighting for science, he was fighting for truth against a system designed to bury it. The biggest challenge was not just convincing the NFL, but also the public. American football is more than a sport, it is a cultural phenomenon. Fans, players, and even medical professionals loyal to the game were resistant to change. The idea that football, a sport so deeply embedded in American identity, could be harming its players was difficult to accept. However, the tide began to turn when more retired players came forward with symptoms. High-profile suicides like those of Junior Show and Dave Duerson, both of whom left notes asking for their brains to be studied, forced people to take notice. Omalu's research was finally getting the attention it deserved, but at a heavy cost. To understand the weight of Omalu's battle, we must examine American football through multiple perspectives: historical, sociological, philosophical, psychological, and economic. Football emerged as a controlled form of violence, echoing ancient gladiatorial contests. It was a game that embodied the American spirit: discipline, resilience, and the willingness to push physical limits. By the early 20th century, it was so brutal that President Theodore Roosevelt intervened to make it safer. Yet, despite helmet improvements and new regulations, the essence of the sport remained unchanged. Collisions were fundamental. The stronger the hit, the louder the applause. Football became more than a game, it became an identity. In towns across America, Friday night lights symbolized pride, unity, and aspiration. Young boys saw the sport as their ticket to fame and fortune, often encouraged by families and communities. But at what cost? The narrative of sacrifice is ingrained in sports culture. Play through pain, be tough, win at all costs. The glorification of suffering made players ignore symptoms of brain trauma, believing weakness was unacceptable. The impact of CTE extends beyond the field. Retired players suffering from memory loss, depression, and aggression often feel isolated. Many, like Sho and Duerson, took their own lives, knowing something was wrong but unable to stop it. The tragedy is that many of these athletes were unaware of the risks when they first stepped onto the field. Football is an empire. The NFL generates billions annually, fueling industries from broadcasting to merchandise. Teams, universities, and advertisers all benefit from the sport's immense popularity. The financial stakes make it difficult to acknowledge the dangers. When Omalu published his findings, the NFL initially dismissed his work, fearing the consequences. A full-scale acknowledgement of CTE could mean lawsuits, lost revenue, and a fundamental shift in how the sport is played. But can financial gain ever justify human suffering? Dr. Omalu's discovery and the subsequent fallout force us to confront the ethics of American football. While the sport has made some changes, the core issue remains: can a violent game ever be truly safe? Is it acceptable to continue celebrating a sport that causes long-term harm to its players? And, in the pursuit of entertainment, at what point do we draw the line between thrill and responsibility? Let us know in the comments. If you're not subscribing to the Usafi channel, you're probably never going to see us again. But if you are, then congratulations, you're growing every day.